Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be Part 64, Chapter 64, entitled Business Students. Are you okay, Midoriya? Ida questioned. Izuku lifted his head to look at his friend. I'm tired, he answered, yawning. You seemed tired yesterday as well. Is something wrong? I keep waking up, Izuku answered, pausing for a moment before adding. I don't think I got a solid hour of uninterrupted sleep. His friend frowned. Do you know why you keep waking up? Izuku shook his head. No. The bell rang and Aizawa came in. Classes started and passed. Izuku ate lunch, sitting next to Monoma and Ida, while Tokiyami and Uraraka sat across from him. Uraraka only ate lunch with him occasionally, usually spending it with the other girls of his class. Lunch passed with some light chatter. They returned to class, and as soon as they entered, they saw their room was cramped, each desk having an extra chair sat at it. Soon everyone was sitting. The bell rang and afternoon classes started. Today you'll be meeting with Class 1I, and their teacher will partner you up. These students are learning about founding and managing hero agencies, managing public relationships between a hero and the public, and helping a hero to keep their public image secure. You should do your best to foster good relationships with these students. There is a saying, a scorned agent will yield in a falling of ranks. These kids can help make or break your future. The door opened, and Aizawa narrowed his eyes a bit as the hero strutted in. She had short blonde hair and a purple visor over her eyes. She wore a tan suit with stripes going down and a purple belt. The woman wasn't smiling. She just stared at them. Class, this is... You can call me Moonbeam-sensei or Gyakuno-sensei. Any other variation will result in a detention. I'm not here to mess around. You will let my students do their jobs. If you have any complaints, keep them to yourselves. Immediately, the class went silent, staring at her with wide eyes. Aizawa frowned. Moonbeam, if my students have complaints, it is wise to... The woman scoffed. Aizawa-kun, I know what I'm doing. I don't need a less experienced teacher trying to tell me what to do. There was a growling sound. Izuku swallowed and sunk into himself a bit. He didn't like this teacher. Though he wasn't alone in his opinion. Some of his classmates were glaring at her, and others were looking around with worried looks. Aizawa's eyes were narrowed, his hair shifting around, though his eyes stayed black. To you, I'm Eraserhead. Just bring your students in. I want this over and done with. Moonbeam opened the door, and a bunch of students started walking in. Aizawa turned to them. If you have any complaints, come to me and I will deal with it as I see fit. Moonbeam turned sharply. This is not your lesson, Eraserhead. She spat his name out. I'm the teacher in charge, and I've set out the rules. Aizawa looked out over his capture weapon, staring unimpressed at her. I will always do what is in the best interest of my students, no matter what you say. And if you have a problem with it, we can take it to Nezu. The woman scowled. Are you going to keep complaining about my teaching methods, or will you let me get on with teaching your... students? As she said students, her lip turned downward, sneering for a moment. I thought UA was supposed to be the best school. What's with these unmanly teachers? Kirishima whispered. Izuku watched as the last of the students came in. There was an almost even amount of girls and boys, and a fourth of the class had an obvious body mutation. One girl had pigtails and tricolored hair, red, black, and blue. Another kid had black patches on his skin that looked like scales. One girl had silver hair and golden eyes. Moonbeam looked down at some paper she was holding. Ida Tenya, you will be paired with Nakamura Aizaline. The girl with the tricolored hair had bounced forward a couple of steps. Ida raised a hand and she changed direction, heading towards him. Mineta Minoru, your partner is Kurero Kaguya. Mineta raised his hand and the silver-haired girl grimaced. Ew, why couldn't I get one of the cute ones? Mineta's sweat dropped, sinking down a bit. As the girl passed by Todoroki, she winked. If you want to meet up after class, just let me know. Todoroki frowned. Why would I? She sighed, taking the extra seat at Mineta's desk. Why must the best-looking ones be dense? Izuku missed a couple of the names while the exchange was going on, a few more students having been assigned to Tokiyami, Sero, and Sato. Aoyama Yuga, your partner is Botan Mizuku. Aoyama waved as he grinned. The girl with light blue hair that faded to darker blue glided over to him. Midoriya Izuku, you will work with Shinsetsu Shoriyumi. Izuku raised his hand up, and the boy with black scales came over. Or rather, slithered over. The boy had a lower half of a snake. Izuku felt himself tensing up. Shirayumi smiled. "Hello, my name is Shinsetsu Shirayumi," the boy said, hissing his S's. "Hello, Midoriya. You really should know better than to try and avoid me," Nashi-sensei hissed, grinning as his tongue flickered out. Izuku opened his mouth, trying to say something, but nothing came out. "Such a good boy. Come here," a hand grabbing his face and tilting his head down. "You know what you have to do." Izuku found himself frozen, unable to move, to think. Distantly he heard an unfamiliar voice asking if he was okay and saw something dark coming towards him. He felt a hand touch him and he flinched away from it. "Go away, go away, go away," Izuku chanted in his mind. The dark blur moved away. "Breathe. It's okay. You're safe," a familiar voice murmured. Izuku relaxed a bit. "In." Izuku took a breath in. "Out." Izuku breathed out. Color started returning, and he saw Aizawa crouching next to him. I'm good now," Izuku answered, giving a strained smile. Dark eyes looked at him for a moment, before the teacher nodded. Then he rounded towards the other teacher. Izuku glanced around, flushing from embarrassment before noticing that almost no one had noticed. Why? Because everyone was arguing. It was chaotic. None of the paired students seemed to really get along or work together. "That's enough," Aizawa said, and all of Class 1A fell silent, while the 1I students kept trying to argue before realizing that 1A had fallen silent. Moonbeam, who had been on her phone, looked up. "What's going on? Why aren't you working?" she questioned. "Do you think that the arguing you heard was working? No, nothing was getting done. You have purposefully put my students with kids in your class who they wouldn't get along with. Why?" The woman crossed her arms as she stood up. "I don't need to explain myself to you. I know how to do my job." "To be frank," Aizawa interrupted her, cutting her off, "I don't think you know what you're doing when it comes to my students." Moonbeam scoffed. "You've only had a few years of experience, so I wouldn't expect you to understand." "Understand what? That the pairs you've created won't work well together?" Aizawa questioned pointedly. "It's not about them working well together. It's about them learning to work with someone they won't get along with. This is a learning experience for when they are actually out working." Aizawa's face remained impassive. "This is not how to teach them that, and definitely not a lesson to have for first years. Today's lesson was just so that they got an initial idea of how working with an agent would go. It is not supposed to be this chaotic. This should have been worked out in the lesson planning session, but since you didn't show—" "This is how I have taught this class for 15 years. I will not let you dictate—" "No, you listen to me. I don't care if this is how you've taught. I will not let you treat my students in this manner, and I'm appalled that this kind of behavior has been allowed to go on." "How dare you?" Moonbeam said, taking a step forward, her face red in anger. "Get out of my classroom." The woman took another step forward, ignoring how Aizawa's capture scarf started unraveling. "Listen here, you—" Aizawa moved. The door slammed open, and a second later Moonbeam was flying out of it, Aizawa glaring with red eyes and hair floating. The teacher turned to them, hair floating down, and he blinked. "One Eye, please return to your classroom. I'm sorry that your lesson was interrupted." "It's fine. We know our teacher's in the wrong," a student with blue hair and swirls on his cheeks said. Another student with a bat-like appearance scoffed. "She's a bitch." "We shouldn't talk about our teacher like that," another said. The students walked out of the classroom, some chattering to themselves, others looking annoyed, and a couple saying quick sorries as they left. Though one guy did mutter, "Man, this classroom's freaky. Where was that growling coming from?" 1A ignored Moonbeam as they heard her shout, "I will be talking to the principal about this." "Man, what a Karen," Kirishima groaned. This caused laughter to break out in the class. Minetta's worried voice poked through the laughter. 2 teachers in as many weeks. Is this going to be a thing now?" This caused them to quiet down as they thought about that. Aizawa looked over at all of them. "If any of the other teachers try, just let me know." "It was very irresponsible of her to behave in such a way. The planning of this lesson should have been discussed in private. Isn't it against the rules for teachers to fight in front of students because it undermines their authority?" "That's enough, Ida. As I mentioned on the first day, UA has a very freestyle teaching method, which means that she is allowed to teach her classes how she wants. Unfortunately for her, you aren't her students, which means that if I deem her behavior unacceptable, that's how it is. Now enough of this." Aizawa looked at them all. "Since we now have some free time." The class tensed up, staring at their teacher. "You can have the rest of the period off." "Quah!" Kaminari called out. Sensei, don't make me scared like that. Aizawa snorted. If that scared you, then you should be terrified of what Nezu has in store. What? The principal is planning something? Ashido questioned, looking curious. Is it the same thing Midoriya did? Asui asked, tilting her head. Yes, he is. No, it isn't. It's something new. I don't know anything more about it, Aizawa answered. Now I'm going to nap. Don't bother me. Everything quieted down, the class keeping to quiet chatter as they did homework or talked with each other. Izuku worked on his homework with Tokiyami. He did notice that some of the kids had pulled out some of the fidget devices Yaoyorozu had made to replace the ones they lost. Izuku tried, but it just wasn't the same as using one Aizawa had given to them, despite them being the same physically. Yo, Tokiyami, was that dark shadow growling? Jiro questioned, spinning in her seat to look at him. It was not I, Dark Shadow said, popping out. Who was it then? It was very annoying. A hiss sounded. I think that whoever is doing it doesn't like you either, Dark Shadow said. Dark Shadow, Tokiyami exclaimed, looking at the shadow. They snickered and disappeared, hiding away from the world again. Jiro scowled, but turned away from them. The rest of the afternoon passed, and eventually the bell rang, and everyone headed home. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 64 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 65 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you so much for listening.